Welcome to episode 7 of No Blueprint, where we will be featuring Soule, also known as Chippewar. He is an artist, clothing designer, tattoo artist, entrepreneur, and he is also an ideas farmer. His artwork has been on billboards, and he is shining a light on Indigenous topics throughout this country. So thank you so much, Soule, for being here with us today, man.
Thanks for having me.
First, I want to start off by, paying homage to the creator for this moment in time for us to connect. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and I'm very appreciative that you're willing to join us on this No Blueprint session. I think it's still very important for us to share these stories and provide a space where we can have a positive opportunity to share, where you've come from and supporting an Afro-Indigenous platform. But I want to just thank the creator for our health and well-being. And pray for all those who are, unfortunately less fortunate than us. So again, thank you and thank the creator for being here. I appreciate that. I want to pay homage to the land. I'm here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. So shout out to our relatives here. I also want to thank our audience for tuning in. That was a big part of this conversation is, there with all the news that is going on, I think that this is still an important opportunity to have that positive space for people to tune into something a little bit different. So I want to make sure that I thank all of our guests for tuning in. And thank you, Soule. I mean, a big part of our conversation before, going live is that there was a hesitation to making sure that we're not taking up too much space during this Black Lives Matter. So I want you to know how much I respect you for bringing that up and how important that is. So I appreciate your perspective, your point of view, and your support to the Black Lives Matter. I mean, the situation is devastating, and I just want you to know how appreciative I am for you to continue to still be here with us, man. So thank you for that. So on that note, I mean, how are you doing through COVID? And is there anything that you want to share considering this Black Lives Matter situation?
Well, something quite interesting happened today, actually, to do with, I believe, possibly to do with Black Lives Matter. Is I live, my storefront is on Queen Street West, and I live in Queen Street West area as well. So I was actually driving home, and as I was driving down Queen Street going west, almost just past Ossington, through the corner of my eye, I clocked this big pallet of bricks on the side of the road. And I was like, yo, what the shit? And I pulled over real quick. And I'm like, I wonder if that has anything to do with what they've been doing in New York City and what they've been doing in other cities around the US, leaving these pallets of bricks. So I jumped out of my van. I ran up to the storefront and they were building there. I asked, I said, is this your pile of bricks? What are you guys doing with this? He goes, oh, no, we have some going in here. It's like Eastern European accent. They're going inside here. I was like, okay, as long as that's where they're going, it's cool. And so I was like, whatever, and I left. And then right before I was leaving my house to drive up to my warehouse, I got a message from some friends saying, yo, like, I really hope you're boarding up your storefront because there's all these groups, messages about these groups who are planning on coming into the city to cause trouble during the peaceful protest. And so, right, and then someone sent, and then within that conversation, they sent me a screen capture picture of exactly where I had stopped probably an hour and a half earlier at Queen and Ossington, where that pallet of bricks was. So, I jumped, coming up to my studio, I jumped on my motorcycle, I ripped past, I went out of my way to go back around before coming up here to see if that pallet of bricks was still there, and it wasn't there. But I pulled up, 3 guys were standing out front, and I asked them, I said, where'd that pallet of bricks go? Is that you guys building in here? And they're like, yeah, they're in there. But I'm like, well, you guys know that if I see this shit out here tomorrow, I'm pulling up with my van and I'm taking them all. So you don't want to lose your shit, don't leave them out, because we're watching what's going around and around the country, and I'm not going to let you guys leave shit out like that to provoke people to be violent and smash windows. And that area in Queen West is all independent businesses for the most part. Corporate America, Canada started like seeping in slowly, and they've kind of got a slow takeover going on right now. But for the most part, I would say it's like 80% like independent businesses. So I mean, that was part of the reason I was a little late actually getting here, because I took that detour to make sure those bricks weren't still there.
Honestly, for you to share that, I want to let you know that I feel like you're really living up to your name. And what I mean is that Chippewa warrior, you know? And I think for you to be willing to look out for what's going on, for you to be mindful of that, for you to be willing to go out of your way to protect the community and to protect the storefronts and the people, I got to give you so much respect and love for that, my man. I think that's really important for people to understand that, you know, if we work together, we can make this a safer, better place for our community and for the people. So thank you for doing your part. Honestly, Jay Soule, it
Yeah,
means a lot.
you know, at the end of the day, I'm not really bothered when I see like huge corporate businesses getting hurt. You know, that doesn't bother me. But when I see like small businesses in my neighborhood who could possibly be affected by that, that really bothers me. That really hurts me, because those people, you know, they work really hard. And what COVID has shown us, that most small businesses in Canada, the United States, are literally a month to 3 months away from folding at any given time, whether it's COVID or any other reason. So you know, it's not the same. They don't have the same issues as like a lot of these big corporate brands have, right? They can have a losing storefront in a neighborhood, and you know, that's okay to them. You know, they're able to write that off. They're able to write off all their merch and all the things they're getting made overseas that are costing pennies on the dollar. You know, in my neighborhood, it's a lot of independent artists. It's a lot of independent businesses, bars, restaurants, cafes, clothing stores, independent boutiques, record shops. I mean, it's, you know, Queen West, right? So where past Bathurst, or past Queen and Spadina, on the west side of Spadina, going all the way down into Parkdale, I would say a good higher percent, I would say more like around 70% these days, is all independent small business for the most part, not corporate Canada, not corporate America. So,
Mm,
you know, we got to look out for our neighbors like that.
exactly. How have you been able to pivot during these COVID times? Like, how are you sustaining yourself during this quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, it's been definitely been difficult. I would say what's been the biggest challenge for me is like maybe staying, you know, mentally strong through it. It's really difficult. I mean, I suffer from really high anxiety. I'm really, for honestly, outside of my artwork, I'm pretty antisocial. I'm a bit of an introvert. Um, Most people who meet me wouldn't really think that when they see me out on the powwow trail at events. I could be like pretty outgoing. I could talk to anyone, but really only within that setting, I feel. Outside of that, I don't really socialize a lot, and I sure as fuck hate like small talk. So
Mm,
I try to avoid humans to avoid small talk, so I don't have to have trivial conversations and, you know, um, just shit conversations. Really, you know, I'm not into it. So, but for me, I guess that's been the biggest challenge, is really trying to stay mentally positive, be supportive of my friends and family, and you know, took up gardening. I went a bit nuts on some gardening, and yeah, I
nice.
mean, still doing artwork and still managing my online store, and haven't been really painting. I just haven't really felt like painting, and feel like I'm ready to get back into it though. And yeah, man, I'm just trying to keep mentally positive, and trying to eat better, and you know, exercise more, and just, it's been a good break actually, of just, you know, being able to kind of sit back and not have to be at a ton of events and art events and powwows, and so all the teaching gigs that I do and school gigs, and it's been a good break.
Nice. I think you're bringing up an important topic that I've been really enjoying having a discussion is about mental health. And, you know, considering what you shared about your mental health, what are some of the things that you do to find that balance through difficult times, especially considering, you know, this quarantine and the fast pace of how our industry can get? How do you find your balance and how do you maintain your mental health?
I think, you know, I would say like mostly through my artwork. I mean, I started doing art as a means of therapy. Like when I started painting, and doing the work that I'm doing now, it was for therapy. I was super depressed. I was having like, crazy anxiety, and I don't know how I ended up finding something about like how art helps heal people. I had at the time I'd gone through a couple of really traumatic experiences, kind of like back to back, and I just started painting. And immediately when I started painting, I just felt this anxiety lift. I found this new focus. So for me, that's always, even in these times, that's always been a huge help. It's always been sort of what really keeps me, mentally stable. And, like I said, I took up doing some like gardening, which, it ended up, over the years, I've had like a couple tomato plants and a few herbs and basil and a few other things. Like right now I have a farm happening on my rooftop patio. I'm pretty privileged to have a pretty big rooftop patio with all south facing. So I get the sun all day, and I have, man, I can't even list them all, but I've got at least like almost 30 different plants right now.
Wow.
That I'm tending to, I'm watering. I nerd out hardcore when I try to learn something new. So I've been like studying on fertilization and on like pruning and the right soil. I mean, you name it, man. When I get into something, I like go so hard deep into it. And I find that's like a great way to just like refocus my energy. And then the joy and the excitement I feel when I go out to my garden and I see, it's been 3 weeks and my tomato plants come up this big, and then I've done all these little pruning tricks to kind of make the plant grow better. And then yesterday, actually, I harvested my first batch of spinach,
Nice.
arugula, and red leaf lettuce, and like a green leaf lettuce, and a huge pile of curly parsley. And I was like, holy shit, man, this is so rad. And it was like, I'm sitting here just thinking like, okay, that's a shitload of parsley. What can I make with that all in one go? So I'm going to make some tabbouleh out of that. And just, yeah, man, it's just, that's been that even more so than art for me right now. And, in the past, like 6 weeks, I've been huge in helping balancing my mental health, because getting up, checking, the first thing I do is I go out and I check on the plants. I'm going out and having my breakfast with them and just chilling and hanging. Then I go checking them on at night. And then before I go to sleep at night, I'm checking the plants to make sure there's no pests. And then I'm watering them and, saying nice things to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge help.
Amazing. I can actually feel the positivity in what you're just sharing, and it kind of lifted my spirit as well. I relate to you. Like just last weekend, I ended up framing my garden outside. I planted some lettuce and some bok choy myself, and then I built 2 raised bed gardens so that just I'm in a condo and there's so much that I can plant in the ground itself. So I figured I'd just build some raised bed gardens and plant some stuff that way, whatever deep rooted vegetables that I want to plant. And that's kind of a kind of goal that I want to go down to. It's really helping me reconnect with the land. And what I've been really trying to do at the same time is every time I'm planting a seed, I'm also being intentional about setting a goal, right? And kind of projecting what that looks like over time, the growth of that plant and the growth of that goal. How can they meet in the middle? And it's just kind of a spiritual aspect of, connecting to the land and how the land can give something back. I think gardening is a great way to find mental health, even if it's one plant in your house and you're nurturing that plant and you're watering it. And speaking to your plants, I was being made fun of I have a roommate who lives here, and they came home one time and they thought I was on the phone with a female because they heard me talking to my plant like, oh, it's so beautiful. It just sprouted. And I was like complimenting him, like, welcome to the world. Like, how are you doing? And I'm like really having a conversation with my plants. But that connection is so real. And I think it makes a huge difference. And I really appreciate you sharing that as an aspect of your mental health. I think that's really important. So
yeah, something really cool happened actually from out of that, is because how my complex is, it's like a townhouse complex, and the neighbors who are kind of across where their patio is, or their rooftop patio is, they've seen my farm and they've started jumping on it. And then the guy next to me,
oh, wow.
he's popping his head over and we're talking, because I've lived in the same spot, about 5 years now. So I know the guy next to me and his family, and he's gone and like gone bonkers and got a whole bunch of plants now. And I've been teaching him all the stuff I've been learning on, and you know, how to prune them and how to get better growth and how to encourage more flower, which is going to make more fruit. But yeah, maybe one thing I could recommend to you is I'm growing in grow bags. And grow bags, and you know, like I was saying, I nerd out on this shit, so I research hard. And the grow bags are really amazing because what they are is they're fabric bags, and they're designed so that you can grow in pots instead of using like traditional pots or like a raised bed. And what these grow bags do is they allow more oxygen to go through the bag because they're fabric, and they also drain a little bit quicker. So it takes a little bit more. You got to sort of watch them to make sure you're watering enough. But the way to mitigate that is you just throw a mulch on top.
Okay.
So that, you know, but they're amazing and they're really cheap, and they're cheaper than buying like the traditional containers that you would grow in. And they're not plastic, which is rad, and they've got, you know, they're just fantastic. But in saying that, it's just like me doing that inspired my next door neighbor to go bonkers. Amazing. And get a whole bunch more. And then take all that knowledge I've been gaining and pass it on to him, and then see the neighbor across, you know, doing the same thing after they've seen mine. It's like slowly they keep kind of adding more and more, and they just, you know, that I can see them. They're at home as well. The guy next door is at home, and you know, it just, you can see those little things that like something as positive as getting your hands into the dirt, and passing that knowledge on and sharing it. It for me, that was really interesting to see that happen.
Man, that makes so much sense. I mean, that's part of the reason why I took it on this season. Like, I've always wanted to start a garden, but I have 3 new neighbors that just moved into the condo beside me, and they made their front lawn look nice. And I was like, I can't have my lawn looking all shaggy and whatever. So I had to step my game up, and that just kind of inspired me to finally get down to gardening. And so that ripple effect and inspiring others, I think is an amazing thing to point out. And when we're doing good, it does ripple effect out into the world. So I appreciate that. I wanted to take a step back if I can, J Soule. Just because I want to make sure that our listeners kind of get a really strong sense of who you are and where you come from. So if you're open to it, what was your life like, your family life like growing up as a young person?
Well, I was part of the 60 Scoop. In 1981, I was forcibly removed from my mother, who's Chippewar. Essentially, myself and my 2 siblings were taken away from my mom. They basically put a gun to her head and said either put them up for adoption or they will make them crown wards of the CAS, and we'll split them up. So, you know, that scared the shit out of her. I was 4 going into 5, my older brother 7, my youngest brother was about 3. And so the thought of us being split up devastated her, and so she agreed to adoption on the stipulation that we would all stay together. And fortunately, we ended up going into the same home. I wouldn't say that it was a great life. There was a lot of shitty things happened in that household. I left there when I was 15 years old. I kept running away, so I ended up in like back into the foster care system. And then back then you aged out at 16. So as soon as I hit 16, the CAS, because I was, you know, a bit of a punk and I wasn't following the rules, they kind of like kicked me to the curb. So, you know, that I spent around about, I guess I was about less than a year in because I would have been like in February when I left my parents' house at 15, and then it was it was about less than a year I was there, and then I got kicked to the curb. So basically from the age of 16 I've been on my own. You know, I had a rough time in a lot of ways, like a lot of other you know, young people who are, you know, don't have any support. I ended up on the street for a good 4 or 5 years. And you know, I always admittedly say it was a choice. 4 years of that was a conscious choice for me to live on the streets. I chose to live on the streets. I came from like a, middle class home, decently educated. But I chose, there was just something in me that I just fucking hated participating in society in any sort of way, whether it meant like going to school, whether it meant having a job, holding an apartment, holding responsibility. So I chose to live on the streets for a long time. And then one day I just sort of just said, okay, fuck it, I'm done with this. And my buddy moved to Toronto and says, yo, I'm gonna get an apartment, man. You wanna take one of the rooms? I'm, yeah, cool. And then he came home one night and said, oh, I got a job at this pub. They're looking for more barbacks. You want a job? I'm like, okay, fuck it. I'll take a job. And from there, that sort of like, just kind of like changed my life, just made a conscious decision to not participate, and then made a conscious decision to participate. And then, it wasn't long after that I sort of kind of fell backwards into the tattoo industry. And I think the tattoo industry, I've been in the tattoo industry now about like 20 years, almost 19 years. And I would say the tattoo industry completely changed and saved my life, because it's the most counterculture job I think you can have, other than being like a rock star and, musician in that sort of sense. It's really counterculture. You can travel around the world. I was able to travel the world on that job. And, for me, it was, really life-changing to be able to kind of like, again, it was something I just sort of asked backwards into. I was actually working in a surf shop in Daytona, Florida, and my friend left the shop and was like, her boss came looking for him and was like, oh, I just where'd Danielle go? And I'm like, she fucked off to California. And he's like, well, shit. She tells me you're good in sales. You want a job? I'm like, yeah, all right. Goes, you got to learn to pierce though. I'm like, do body piercing. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can handle that. And that was it, man. And I worked around 6 years as a body piercer primarily, and then after 6 years, I started apprenticing as a tattoo artist, and that's kind of what brought me into arts and visual art. I mean, that dude is like the fucking nutshell version. There's not like
Of course.
so much more within that, but that's like condensed way up,
Right. I mean, like I relate to you in the sense of moving out at a young age. I moved out when I was 16, and I'm born and raised in Winnipeg. And where I moved out was like the hood of Winnipeg between Spence and Yonge Street. So anybody who's been to Winnipeg knows that's one of the hoods in Winnipeg. And if it wasn't for my music as a way to channel and express myself and tell my truth and share my story, I don't know where I would be today, to be honest. So I just relate to that story of, moving out young and trying to find yourself. And I just feel grateful that I had a medium like art and music to express myself. So I think it's admirable, and I'm happy that tattooing has really been a part of your life, and art has really influenced that kind of journey for you. So I think that's incredible. If you don't mind, I'm going to continue to kind of ask a question about some of your family history. I just think part of what I'm trying to do here with No Blueprint is shed a light on the human being behind all of the art and all the things that people see in the front end, because I think it's really important to humanize that experience, to allow other people who might be tuning in and listening, who want to start a career in the arts, and realize if they can relate to any parts of our story, that they can do it too, considering they might be against all odds. So I came across a photo on your Instagram, and it stood out, of course, because your Instagram's full of all of your incredible art, but it's a picture where you're actually sharing a hug with your biological mother. And so I wanted to ask you, what was that moment like to reconnect, and has that influenced your art in some way or fashion?
Well, I mean, it's first and foremost, it's completely influenced my art and really changed my life. I met her at the time when I reconnected with her. I was living on the streets in Toronto, and I was spending a lot of time at a drop-in center that was on Yonge Street, Yonge and College. It was Native Child Family Services, and it used to be in the basement. So I'd go there and I'd do like some of their programming. You could go there, get a meal. You could go hang out. You could use the phones. And, I got to know a lot of the staff back then. And actually, Steve Teakins, who runs NAMI Res back then, he was a counselor way back then, I think he was really just kind of like starting out. He's really new to it back then. But I knew Steve from back then, and I connected with one of the counselors there named Joanne. And Joanne actually was from the same reserve I come from, except she's on the Delaware side. So Delaware, where my reserve is, like Chippewar, Oneida, Delaware. And Delaware is kind of just like dab in the middle of our res. And so she was actually a Delaware member. And she actually at the time, she helped, guided me to getting my status card. So while I didn't have ID. And so she helped me get my ID and get my status card. I had never applied for it. I'd never gone to fill out the paperwork. So she helped me with all that. And during that process, I got just telling her about my story and where I came from. And, she says, well, we could find out if you're where your mother is, if she's still alive or where she's at, because if she put her name onto the registry, we could help you find her. So, yeah, I remember we just filled out the paperwork, and at the time I was super transient. I was going between Toronto, back to Kingston, to Windsor. We hitchhiked out to Vancouver. I was all over the place. So, like most drop-in centers, you go and do some paperwork, and then you forget about shit. And then one day I just kind of like popped in. Joanna was like, "Jay, where have you been? I haven't seen you." It'd been many, many months since I had popped in, and she goes, I have the paperwork from your mom. Your mom is registered, and she's written some letters. So my mom had written me some letters, and they gave me the letters, and I read through them, and yeah, I ended up calling her. I don't know. Not long after, we spoke on the phone, and then at the time she was living in Peterborough, and I ended up going down to Peterborough and meeting her. Wasn't really a great experience. I don't want to get too much into it. The initial meeting, even our relationship with her was like really difficult. She suffered from mental health issues, substance issues, depression. So it was really hard. It was hard. It was definitely difficult for us, but my two siblings weren't able to connect with her in a way that I was. I'm a lot more forgiving. I'm a lot more kinder and gentler, whereas they're a little more hard. We were able to maintain a relationship off and on over the years, but it was difficult. It was really, really difficult to maintain that with her, just because of her issues, and of course my own issues, and being transient and that sort of thing. But yeah, unfortunately she passed about three years ago, but I miss her.
Respect, man.
A lot.
I appreciate you sharing that, for real.
Yeah.
And with you sharing that, I want to acknowledge your resilience, man. And having this opportunity for you to share your truth like that, I'm very grateful for, because I think our young people, it's a great reminder of how strong we can be, of the resilience we have. And you've been able to take such a challenging past, challenging history, and turn it into some incredible art. You're an entrepreneur, tattoo artist. You've inspired people. I can take this back to one of your art pieces that you had on a billboard, and just describe how educational, impactful your artwork is. Even for me, when I was researching your career and looking at some of the things you've accomplished, that piece where you put up on, I think it was Richmond and Spadina, where you had money received by First Nations are not tax dollars. They come from land and resources treaty, federal controlled trust funds. That educated me, even as an Indigenous person, to make that clear connection of where those dollars come from. And why was that important for you to make? I understand the statement you're making, but I'm tying in your resilience of your story and how that's translated into your art. So why was that an important piece for you to do?
Well, a lot of people don't understand or know the story behind that art piece. And I'll try to keep it quick, the short version of it. But essentially, I was driving one day, and it was just after the acquittal of the murder. The man who murdered Colton Bushy, he was acquitted. And so on CBC radio, Duncan McHugh, who, I don't know if you know his show, it's every Sunday, Cross Country Checkup. It's a call-in show, and they discuss different topics. People get to call in and voice their opinions. And that Sunday, they were discussing the acquittal of Gerard Stanley for the murder of Colton Bushy. And right as I tuned in, I caught sort of the last tail end of the last speaker. And then Duncan took the next caller. And this next caller just kind of went off. And, you know, he had sort of like a, you know, old man twang, country twang to him. And he says, you know, well, what we got to do is we got to stop using tax dollars on these Indians, and you know, if they could go get jobs and they had jobs, they could look after the women and family. And I'm like, you know, I'm having one of those moments driving. I'm fucking gripping the wheel. I'm like, fuck you, and I'm like yelling at the radio. People driving around me must have thought I was crazy, and that just really pissed me off. I was just like I've dealt with racism directed towards me as a young guy in Kingston. It's Kingston, Ontario is where my adopted family lived. And it's like 99% white, middle class for the most part. I dealt with racism like that before. In Kingston, I've literally gotten into fights and brawls with people because of that, about the whole tax dollar issue. And anyway, so, you know, hearing him say that, and then combining with my own lived experience, you know, I sort of just had this moment. I was like, fuck, man, I got to think of a way to sort of like put this message out there so people understand where exactly it comes from. And then the thing is that took around like 6 weeks of research and my own time and energy to figure that out. I spoke to the chief of Ontario at the time. I spoke to the regional chief of Quebec because during that 6 weeks, I was in Montreal at a youth summit, Indigenous Youth Summit. I spoke to Romeo Saganash, who is an MP. I spoke to a policy analyst, Russ Dibo. I spoke to the chief on my reserve. And it took me 6 weeks of like talking to all these different people to find out, okay, like where does this money come from? Yeah. And the interesting thing that happened was each one of those people all had variants of the same story to tell. It was just kind of like framed a little bit slightly different. But at the end of the day, it came down to none of the monies used come from tax dollars. And when you think about racism towards Indigenous people, it trickles down because of that institutional racism. And the funniest shit happened is during that 6 weeks, I think it's around like March or so, they announced the new federal budget. And so again, you know, I'm for the most part in my car, I like listen to talk radio. I'm a bit of a nerd like that. And so I'm for the most part have it locked to CBC. And so you heard the commercial where they say they're going to announce the next federal budget. So I was like curious, I'm going to listen to this. And of course, lo and behold, when they talk about the federal budget, how they worded it to me was like really, it just for me cemented what I was about to do was that much, that it needed to be done, because the radio announcer or whatever you host or whatever who was announcing it says, well, the federal government has released its budget saying they're going to increase funding for First Nations housing. They're going to increase funding for First Nations education. They're also going to increase funding for seniors' drug plans or some shit. And they just kind of rhymed off. And I was like, exactly. This is why that systemic racism happens towards Indigenous people when it comes to that whole, you know, we got to stop paying for the Indian shit, is because the way in which the government words that leads people to believe by using the word funding, the definition of funding, of how that is, it gives the perception that it is free money that is you know, being given or from the tax dollars, and it's not. And that's why on that billboard I used #NotFunding, because I think it was hugely important for non-Indigenous, but even Indigenous, because a lot of the comments I had through Facebook and Instagram were like, holy shit, I didn't know that. And they were Indigenous. So I was like, I didn't know it. It took me, like I said, 6 weeks to get to that. So, you know, just impulse too. Like I'm an impulsive guy. I'm an impulsive artist. When I get an idea, I just sort of do it. But I like to take the time and energy to research things and to know what I'm doing. And it really can be troll proof, because I've been involved in other stuff and I've been trolled. I've gotten hate mail. So I wanted to make sure it was troll proof. And the most amazing thing happened is on that Facebook post, here and there trolls happen, but I didn't even have to address it, because for the most part, people would like the Indigenous community was just like shutting them down.
Right.
And they literally would just troll it with some like really stupid shit really quick. And then they would have no comeback, because I wanted to design that in a way that it was troll. You couldn't argue with it, right? It was like factual based.
That's so significant, man. I need to really just highlight a lot of what you're sharing. You take your history of your past, of where you come from, translate that into art, intentionally understand, some of the topics that are in your life that mean something, do the research, and you put it into your art. And as a result, whether it's conscious or not conscious, the impact is a ripple effect and actually helping the rest of the community and the world around you make that positive change. All the things you discussed is no simple task, but the fact that you channeled a lot of that hurt and a lot of that energy that you needed to get out and put it into a positive outlet, I think is a strong sign of your resilience and a strong example of what resilience can look like. And as a result, not only are you able to make a positive difference in your own life, but you're able to also educate and inform others around you. And I think that's so important to highlight and make clear. So I think another thing that it made me reflect on is how important that is in regards to appreciating people's art, specifically yourself and artists who are very intentional with their art pieces, is that this, in some circumstances, it's not just something we're doing for fun and, you know what I mean, it's romanticized and we're making this thing look pretty because we think it's cool and want to put it up on our wall and make some money. A lot of the time, these art pieces are intentional to create a conversation, to create education and awareness of certain things and make a positive impact. So I hope that our listeners are grasping that art is, in your art specifically, has a really powerful intention behind it to educate and to create positive impact, but as well as an expression of your life journey. I think that's incredible, man.
Well, for me, my art is all about my healing journey and reconnecting with my community and my family. Growing up from the age of 5 to 15 in a, sort of middle class home, I had a lot of privilege growing up, and I still have a lot of privilege being, what would be considered white passing, right? I'm mixed of Chippewar and Lebanese. My mother's Chippewar, my father's Lebanese. So, as a white passing male, I have a lot of privilege that I still carry. So I feel that, I don't know what it is that sort of drives me. I know it's my own healing journey, but I feel like I have something in me that just drives me to try to educate other people, and really at the same time is really educate myself and really help me on my own healing journey.
To be able to speak to an artist, I think is so inspiring for me. I'm not necessarily a artist, painter, visual artist myself, but to hear the stories from an artist and how their art is an extension of who they are and how that has created, inspiration throughout the community, I find so inspiring. So I'm incredibly grateful for this moment, for this No Blueprint podcast, to be able to shed light on such an incredible artist like Soule, and how he's been able to take his story of his upbringing and put that into something positive. And I really think that this entire conversation is now an amazing example of resilience and how inspiring it is to hear your stories and how you've been able to translate that into a form of your resilience, man, and overcoming some of those challenges. So I appreciate everything that you're doing with your art, Soule. It's pretty incredible. So if we could maybe back up a little bit, explain to us a little bit of Chippewar and where that name came from.
Growing up, are coming from the tattoo industry background is, at the a lot of street artists and tattoo artists and guys I knew in the industry would publish their art under kind of like pseudonames or anonymous names. And, I always sort of admired that. And I thought, J Soule is kind of just a boring ass name. So I thought, what if, I was going to publish my artwork, what would I publish my work under? And, I started brainstorming and kind of just made a sandwich out of being Chippewar and warrior, and just kind of fused Chippewar and warrior. And that's how I came up with Chippewar. It's kind of, it talks a bit too about just, our people, Indigenous people, have been at war for 500 years. So I think it's sort of, I thought it was sort of fitting, and then it just sort of worked. And
nice.
Yeah, kind of stuck with it.
I think one of the other things I'd love to highlight about your story is that you've had a brick and mortar location for a long time, and you're in your second location. Is that right?
No, I've had a brick and mortar store for about 15 years, actually.
Okay.
Originally, it started off as just solely a tattoo shop. I ran that just solely as a tattoo shop for the last, for about 9-10 years. And then the last 5 or so, I've just been running it as my storefront, Chippewar. But, over the years, I've had, good handful of storefronts. It hasn't been just in one location. As your leases expire, or, you're dealing with slumlords, sometimes you got to move. Yeah, where I'm at now at Queen Street West, I've been in that location now going on 4 years. A lot of challenges in running any business. And I think something, that you sort of touched on of just earlier is just like inspiring people to sort of like go out there and to make shit happen. But to understand for me, that was that even before I opened the store, that was like I spent probably 6 years from the moment in the first tattoo shop I went into. I started plotting doing this. I started drawing the blueprint of what my shop would look like. And the craziest shit happened is that when I opened my first shop, I literally would walk into a space, be able to look around and go, no, it's not going to work, because I had drawn this blueprint, and really poorly, just on like a plain piece of paper. I knew where the chairs are going. I knew where the sink was going. I knew where the waiting area is going. So I was able to walk into a space and assess it really quick and go, no, it's not going to work. And I could walk out. But when I found that space for my first shop, I walked in and went, oh shit, yeah, this is a square. I just wanted like a plain square, and it gave me a clear blueprint to do what I wanted to do. And then the craziest thing is I designed it exactly to that like first drawing. Wow. So it wasn't overnight. It took, 6 years of plotting, because also in between that I was researching on, where do you get all the fixtures to put into the shop. I started researching that. I mean, it was a lot of work. And then even when I opened that first shop, something that was supposed to cost $25,000 ended up costing over $75,000.
Wow.
I was literally on the brink of failure if I didn't figure something out within like a matter of weeks, because I had spent 6 months, over 6-7 months actually, renovating and getting a space ready, when it should have been like, boom. I was just underprepared. I just wasn't ready. And fortunately, I had someone step in, and I was telling them about the situation I was going through. And then like a week later, I got a check in the mail that I was not expecting. If it wasn't for that check in the mail, I would have been out $75,000. And all of that $75,000 was all borrowed money from actually different friends and family had lent me that money. I was fortunate enough to get loans through a business development corporation on my reserve. I would encourage any young Indigenous entrepreneurs who want to get into doing business or want their own business, that there are resources available like business development programs and business development banks in your communities. And if they're not, most of these, if they're not in your communities, they'll fund indigenous business and entrepreneurs. So that's a whole process in itself, though. Like I had to write a business plan. I have a grade 9 education. I had to hire a consulting company to write that business plan for me. That cost me $5,000
Wow.
to write that business plan. You know, I know now there's resources. Back then it was a little different. I know there's a lot more resources to get things like that done. But I mean, my journey has not been easy. There's been a lot of struggle, a lot of failure even in between that. And yeah, I mean, it's, I don't ever want to like perceive that, you know, like I got shit made, because I don't, man. I still struggle like everybody else. And it's a constant hustle to keep going and doing what I do.
I respect that. I respect that grit, you know, and that grind, that hustle, that determination. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I really feel like you're reminding me of something that has been guiding me throughout my journey in trying to be successful in as an artist myself, is that when you find that vision and when you find that sense of purpose, it has to be so deep and so important for you that it has to be more important than the struggle to get there. And when you find that, when you find that purpose, hold on to it, because the struggle becomes worth it in the end. I mean, you're now sitting in your storefront in your location. And that was kind of one of the next questions I wanted to ask you is, how has, you know, operating a diversified storefront? I mean, you know, not only have your art there, but you also have your clothing line. You also have your tattoo parlor. How has diversifying your storefront helped you build a sustainable career as an artist?
Well, you know, one thing that before I answer that, I just
Yeah.
touch on is like to understand that even though when you're thinking about these things and you have all this drive and all this vision to try to do what you do, it's okay that that vision changes, because, you know, like I said, over the last 5 years, for the most part, I've left tattooing. Like I don't tattoo a lot anymore. And for, you know, I've been working really hard over the last 5 years to transition out of tattooing. You know, I spent 15 years grinding in tattoo shops, and I sort of got tired of it. And I think a lot of people need to understand that's okay. Your vision of what you're doing is going to change, and all the struggle that I went through, all the years plotting to go through that and then just kick it to the curb. You know, you need to understand that's okay to do that. Like you, as a person, you're growing, you're evolving, you're changing, you're trying new things. And for me, that's been about what my artwork's been about. Has just been like finding myself and trying new things. And it's why I paint between many different styles and a lot of different content. And you know, the things I do with clothing and the billboards and the stuff I do with minimalist art, the stuff I do with the movie posters, the safe shit that I do, mural work, teaching. I mean, the only way I think as an artist you're going to make it this day and age is that you have to be really, really diverse. I know a lot of artists, and I've known a lot of artists over the years, and a lot of them struggle for the reason that for the most part they're one-trick ponies. They do like one thing and they do it to death, and they don't really explore shit outside of that. So for me, I've known that you know, going into business, you know, if this part of your business isn't working, you got to look at why it's not working and what you can do to either change to make it work or change out of it, and get geared into something else that sort of can all be like all related. So, you know, I think it's important to know as an artist, especially in this climate, you have to be diverse. You have to work really hard to be diverse. It takes a lot of I guess really a lot of time and energy in researching new things you want to try, and failing. You know, I've had a lot of failures over my career, and, you know, understanding that those failures that I've had are education. You know, a lot of people go out and spend $100,000 on getting an education. I've probably in the last 15 years lost 100 grand trying new shit in my business, or trying to venture out into new businesses that didn't work, and I just like pissed that money away. So, you know, I don't know if that really answers it, but I guess it's just be diverse, right?
Definitely. I definitely think it answers it. Diversification in your craft and what you're passionate about will help you build a sustainable career. If you hone in on one thing, that might be the death of you. It may not be necessarily the truth for everybody, but in order to build a sustainable career, I think in the arts, it helps to have a diversified portfolio.
For sure. I think something important too that you sort of mentioned about like why I do, why I do my art. And
Yes.
for me, what is to understand is I do my artwork for me.
Mm.
Everything that I do first and foremost starts off is because something I've researched or something I'm interested in. I think it's really important for young people coming into art, especially the youth or even older people who are getting into art. Do it for yourself. Don't do it for anyone else but yourself. And if people enjoy it, that's fantastic, but make it about you. Don't try to cater to people's shit. Don't try to cater to a certain style or a certain group or a certain demographic. Just do something because it's helping you and you enjoy it and you feel good. Because the moment you start trying to do artwork and it's not for you, I think you're going to end up with more pain and hardship than if you're just doing it for yourself.
Man, that's deep right there. And I say that because when you were explaining it, it actually reminded me that goes back to that therapy. Art was therapy for you. And it goes back to reminding me of my career as an artist. That's my therapy. And as a result, it's actually a form of self-love. Is that when you do that, you're doing it for yourself. And as a result, when you share it with the world, you never know what that could turn into.
Yeah,
So
no, and there's been controversy. There's a lot of controversy within the Native arts community about, who people do their artwork for. And at the end of the day, someone posed that question to me a few weeks ago when we were talking about that, and I said, that's for me, my art. That's what it's about. It's for me. I do it for myself. I do it for my healing journey, for my education journey. And if other people get shit out of it, fucking A. But I can't, and I will admit, I've done series of work that weren't for me, and it's fucking backfired. I got 70 paintings, unsold paintings.
interesting.
Probably a good 20 of those are just shit I hate that I did
Wow.
because it's like safe, it's boring, wasn't much story. I feel like there wasn't much intention. People like it, people enjoying it, but for me, it's just like I'm just not into it. And for me, my art needs to say something. It needs to have a message and to be able to share what I've taken the time to educate myself in. And, I think it's just hugely important that people understand is do this shit for yourself.
Wow.
And I hope it doesn't sound selfish. I don't feel like it is. I just feel like that it's far more important for you to use your art in that way. To first and foremost make it about you, and in the hopes that if other people do enjoy it or take something from it, then that's just the bonus.
I think there's nothing self-centered about loving yourself, and when you do that, that's going to help you help other people. And I honestly feel as though because of the way that it's framed, love yourself, it sounds fluffy or it sounds soft, but that's actually one of the hardest, realest things that you can do is figure out how to do that. And as a result, I mean, when you share that, it can make real positive impact in your own life and for others. And that's just a default. That's kind of a ripple effect. So I appreciate you sharing that. And speaking of art, I was curious, you shared a lot just now, but I was curious about your experience with Blood Quantum. It's in a recent project. And for those who don't know, Blood Quantum is a movie that just recently came out by Jeff Barnaby. Jeff Barnaby is a Mi'kmaq director, writer, composer, and film editor. And Jay Soule's work is part of some of the movie teaser posters. So I wanted to know how you got involved with that project and what was that experience like for you?
I don't really remember exactly how it happened. I want to say somehow or another, I want to say it was like the distribution company is the one who got in touch with me originally for that. And I don't even recall how they found me. If I recall, he said something. The guy I talked to was just like, he'd seen my artwork, he'd seen the movie poster work that I do, and thought it'd be rad if I would contribute something for a teaser poster. And something weird happened is simultaneously while the production company got a hold of me, or not the production company, the distribution company got a hold of me. Simultaneously, someone from TIFF got a hold of me to do a movie poster for something that was happening at TIFF. And I actually thought I was talking to the same people. And so I'm having one meeting through email, and then I end up having a phone call, and then I think it's all about the same thing. So I ended up actually doing two posters. One was for TIFF, for their Midnight Madness for the film festival. It went into this little zine they made, and then I did the teaser poster for Jeff, and that was rad, man. Jeff is an amazing filmmaker and just a rad dude, and it was a huge honor to be a part of that, and it was just I don't know. The coolest thing about it is while in order to do the poster, I was like, well, I have no idea what the film's about. What are the images? So I actually got an advanced copy of the film before it came out, even before its launch at TIFF.
Crazy.
And the copy that I got had no music in it. It had little things like music here. It had insert animation here, this, that, a bunch of other stuff was kind of like through that advanced copy.
Wow.
And so it was cool. I ended up actually watching the film I think 4 times in order to make that poster, just because I'm a movie nerd, so I just got super into it. And then I went to the premiere of it, which was really cool because it was rad to see. It was such a different experience watching the film again, 1 on the big screen, but 2 with the music, because it's so interesting of how music can just set the tone of a scene. And that final scene, at the end, he's fighting with the katana. That scene gave me goosebumps, dude, because of the music. That didn't happen the other 4 times I watched it, but with that music and the drums coming in, I was like, whoa, holy fuck, man! It was just really rad.
That's amazing. I wanted to, as we wrap this up, man, I wanted to reflect a little bit, on the first time I met you. I know we're kind of diverging a little bit here, but I think it's just important to share. Like, the first time I met you was at the Polaris Prize Awards that just took place. That was the first time, and I'm reflecting on it because in the beginning of your story sharing here, you just were reflecting of how introverted you are. And if you didn't say, hey, what's up, Jacoda, I don't know if I would have recognized you. I mean, one, it was dark, but it was just, you were in the sections a little bit behind me, and I was just kind of walking by and you said something, and I was sitting next to you at that point, and I just thought, oh damn, this is Chippewar right next to me. I thought that was so cool. So I just was reflecting, and this was the first time that I crossed paths with you in the flesh. I think that was really epic. But in closing here, man, I'm going to ask you one final question. And that question is, if you can paint a picture of the future, what would that look like to J Soule?
Oh, fuck, man. I don't even know how to answer that, dude. That's, I mean, which future are we talking about, right? Whose future? What future? Humankind, animal kind? I don't know, man.
Interesting.
I don't know. And that's the thing, even when it comes to my work, that's the kind of shit I gotta go sit out and nerd out on and really reflect on and think about. Because most of my work, it takes several drafts to get to where it's something that that I could dig and that I would share. I don't know, man. I couldn't say.
It's all good.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. No, I think
but
that's
to answer answer something you said about meeting me in the flesh, dude. The only way I was able to do that, to talk to you there, is because that was art related, bro. That's in an art setting. It was music, art, label, and in settings like that.
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
I can get through.
I see what you're saying.
Outside of that, it's and I know your music too, bro. So I just want to say what's up because I'm a fan of your music.
Yo, respect to that, man. It means a lot. I'm so glad I was able to connect with you this way, to hear your story. I just respect you and the work that you're doing so much more, so much deeper, so much richer. I respect you a lot for taking the time to share your truth and share your story, considering the times that we're in. So I want you to know how much humility I have for your presence here on this No Blueprint series. I'm really thankful and full of gratitude, man. So thank you for joining us here today, man.
Great to hang, dude. Miigwech for having me.
Wash day. And I hope that we'll reconnect on another front. And I hope that, you travel forward in your life in a good way. And I really look forward to crossing paths with you at some point.
All right, homie. Take care, man.
Thanks a lot. You too, man.
All right. Peace.
Later.